whatever talents you have, whatever skills and experience, whatever your gifts are that you have to bring to the wide world, buried talents do not produce. They don't help you. They don't help me. If you're playing small, you're not helping anybody. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham, and today's episode is going to be about the name Durham Talents. It's also going to be about the idea of digging up buried talents. And what we'll do to reference is mention a great story from a very old book that is set up in the ancient Middle East, where there lived a very rich landowner and trader. Now, this wealthy landowner had been successful in many different areas. He had multiple orchards of all the things that you would expect from that time and place, the figs, the dates, and he had a couple of different very prominent, the best in their area, vineyards, where he produced wines and vinegars and fresh fruits, of course. And he was moving into some coastal businesses. So he's preparing for a long trip that would take him to the coast, where he was going to begin a shipping business, a fishing business, just move into that area from his inland businesses of orchards and vineyards and such. And to prepare for this long journey, he put some of his overseers, some of his most prominent taskmasters, in governance of different areas of his business in his absence. And with one of his most trusted managers that had been with him the longest, he put in charge of his orchards. They were the largest of his businesses at that time, the dates and the figs and the almonds and such. He was put into control of various orchards that he would manage, again being the most trusted of these managers, the most trusted of these overseers. He was put in charge of these various orchards to continue and grow and develop that business in the landowner's absence. Next, again with another highly trusted, someone who had been with him a very long time, overseer, he put in charge of those same vineyards that were producing, and they were the best in their area, they were best in their class. He was the most prominent fresh grape, vinegar, and wine producer in that area. So he put, again, a very trusted, highly respected manager and overseer in charge of those vineyards during his absence of launching this new business in fishing and shipping and everything that was going to take him far away to the coast from these inland orchards and vineyards. And then he had a more recent hire, a more recently acquired manager who was going to be put in charge of an inn that he had built in the town that housed all of this developing commerce, the going and the coming of other business folks and traders and visitors that would come in and be buying from his orchards, buying from his vineyards. So it made sense at that time and place, of course, to build an inn where he would be able to house visitors, house tradespeople, and earn revenue and expand the accommodations in that area for his growing business, for his growing commerce. So when the time came for the landlord to take his departure, he had given instructions to these three different managers, these three overseers, and he took off on his business, leaving them knowing that there would be a lot of time to lapse, but he fully trusted them to do well with these different tasks. And rightly so, with the first governor that was put in charge of the orchards, went immediately to those orchards, stepped into learning about that industry, building up a solid team, humbling himself and getting information from those that had been working there for all these past years, and immediately went to work to grow and expand and develop those orchards and that business. Likewise, the overseer that had been put in charge of the vineyards went immediately that day to work in learning about the vineyards, laying eyes on the property, meeting with all the different team members there, those that were pruning, those that were fertilizing, those that were managing that business as well, team building, learning the industry, learning that area to grow and to develop that business. Likewise, immediately, the overseer that had been put in charge of the inn went, met everyone that was there, looked at the property inside and out, and immediately went to work as well. Now, when it turned out that the landowner was making his journey back to his hometown from his business endeavor, of course, he was very anxious to get a review of what had happened with his extensive vineyards and his vast orchards, etc. So what they did is they walked through the town together as they recapped what had happened in his absence. And with the oldest and most trusted advisor that had been put in charge of the vast orchards, the review was that there had been 5 various types of fruits produced in these vast orchards. And what the overseer had done was he had learned each of those, monitored, and developed the propagation methods of all these different orchards. He had built a solid team in the very long time that the owner had been gone, and he had just done everything right. And when the account was given, what he had done was doubled the size and the production of those original orchards. So he had developed into twice the space that had originally been occupied. They had literally doubled the production. They were producing twice as much of these figs and dates and almonds and all these different things. And the landowner was absolutely blown away. He said that it was beyond his expectations. He was super pleased. He commended the governor for his fruitful endeavors, for scrupulously studying and expanding and growing and developing an already top of the class business model. And immediately on the spot, he made him a part owner of those very same orchards that he had been tending and growing and developing for so long now. Part owner on the spot. And as they continued walking through the town, the governor that had been put in charge of the vineyards gave his account as well. And what he related was that, again, he had built a solid team. He had learned the landscape. He continued to develop the practices that had already been in place. And he as well had made leaps and bounds in literally expanding the footprint of the vineyards in size, but also in their productivity. So what he had done is not only were they now still providing fresh table fruits and eventually wines and vinegars from the fruits of the vine, but also, whereas formerly they had been simply discarding the grape seeds, they had learned how to use the grape seeds themselves instead of just discarding those, and were now producing a very high quality grapeseed oil. So they developed a brand new product from the same processes that they had originally been using. They doubled the size of the footprint of the entire production, and they were providing more goods and services than ever before. And again, it pleased the landowner immensely how this governor had branched into this new area and this new development had expanded their production and their growth. So on the spot, he was given part ownership of the very same vineyards. He couldn't have been happier. The landowner was super pleased. Revenues were through the roof. They had expanded their footprints on all fronts. They were producing new products, providing folks of that area and surrounding areas for leagues and leagues around with the best of products. And they continued walking through town, and by this time they had gotten to the inn, the best building in town that had been constructed just prior to and completed prior to the departure of the landowner to begin this coastal business. And what he saw left him in a stupor. He turned the corner and saw his inn the prize property and structure of that entire province, boarded up, locked up, vacant, dormant. Not a thing was happening. Because what that overseer had done was to immediately realize the vast responsibility that had been given to him. And in his fear, he had turned out all the employees. He had turned out all occupants and any future occupants because he was too afraid that any damage would happen to this prize of a structure while it was under his stewardship. And he simply decided that there would be nothing that would happen to destroy the beauty of this place. And as this third overseer saw the ghastly expression of the landowner, he began to immediately make excuses and give reasons of why he had decided to do what he had done. And after a very long, silent, excruciatingly silent pause, the owner turned to this overseer, dismissed him on the spot, despised him for his fear and for his sloth, told him that he should have at least have kept it running as it was before his departure. That way he could have continued to earn revenues from those that were traveling to the area regardless. Those that were coming to visit that area regardless. If he would have just maintained things as they were so that there would still be that stream of income, that stream of revenue for the business that he had already built before his departure. Well, after dismissing that individual, making sure to mention that not only was he dismissed from any position, but that his own abode, which was owned by the landowner, would be the collateral that he would accept for the loss of revenue from the horrible mismanagement of that overseer. And in fact, at that exact moment, the landowner put that first manager in possession of the inn to immediately get it up and running and open for this area that had grown and expanded in the meantime. Now, for you biblical scholars out there, you've perceived that I've given my own relation, and I hope that you trust that I'm not attempting to do any damage to the scriptures, but that I've related the parable of the talents as told by Jesus Christ. And the lessons here, while there are many that are theological and philosophical and spiritual, I would like to address the practical implications for our particular use of this parable when considering the infinite banking concept. Because what we see in Matthew chapter 25 is a verse that says, "For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath." So this parable, this story, and that scripture makes me consider certain rules that we see Nash lay out. And I love it because in his book, Becoming Your Own Banker, he references scriptures and he references this particular parable as well. And I love that he does that. I love that view. I love how he causes us to consider these words in different ways. And that's actually how I've developed the idea behind what we're doing on this channel is we're digging up buried talents. You see, talents that are buried do not produce. Talents that are buried do not reproduce. They don't grow. They don't develop. And when I'm saying talents, sure, that could literally be today's equivalent of a talent then, which would be, let's say, precious metals, for example. But regardless of what it is that we're talking about, let's remember, as Nash taught us, that banking just is. And we finance everything that we do. And either we are paying interest for using someone else's capital, or while amassing our own capital, we forfeit the opportunity to earn interest. And the idea of banking is bringing it back to the me and you level where we systematically amass our capital in a place that we own and control, and then we can deploy it for our need of finance. And then because of that system that we have in place and the control and the ownership, we can recapture our capital, recapture our principal, recapture the interest that otherwise would have forever have left us. Just like it was said here, at the least, you should have kept the inn running. Don't board it up and close it down and shut it down where it cannot do anything. Don't dig a hole and put gold down in the hole. It's not going to do anything. And I hope that you understand by now that I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do with precious metals or investments, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, whatever the case may be. Again, let's remember that we're talking about banking. In that scripture, if you look it up, Matthew chapter 25, the landlord said, at least you should have given these talents, these funds, this capital to the bankers. That way I could get my money back plus interest, plus growth. At the very least, he said. So again, I think there's a great point here because banking is not the investment. Banking is a function. Banking is a process. Now, what we do with our capital may yield investment revenues, may yield profits or what have you, and they hopefully will. But banking takes place regardless of whether we're talking about an investment, regardless of whether we're talking about something that we simply consume. And to bluntly name college, to just bluntly name some things, college experiences. How do we do that? How do we buy our cars? How do we buy business equipment? How do we take vacations? How do we put braces on our children or any other medical expenses? How do we pay for weddings? So all these different things that we're already doing, whatever our need of finance is, whatever our financial footprint looks like, are we in a position of ownership and control? Do we have an entity that we own and a system that is in place to be able to deploy our capital, but also to be able to recapture that capital back into our household, back into our business, back into our investing portfolio, accounting for the banking function in our lives? So at the very least, that capital should have been given to the bankers to be able to earn interest at the least, let alone doing what the other examples were that were given, where 5 talents were turned into 10, where 2 talents were turned into 4, where these other overseers, these managers, had put to work the money, not just accounting for banking, but yet even more than that. But for those that would simply realize our need of finance and would seek to do that in a privatized way by acquiring whole life policies with a mutual company that pay a dividend and systematically build up a system of those policies to account for eventually, over our lifetime, what would be our entire financial footprint, then we would simply win by default, let alone what we do with that capital would be above and beyond. So I hope that this has been a helpful relation of a good story, that we can take lessons today and recognize that when Nash talks about the golden rule, he who has the gold makes the rules. See, that owner was in a position of ownership. He had control. He was able to direct his funds where he wanted it, when he wanted it, and on his terms. He who has the gold makes the rules. When we account for our need of banking and realize that we finance everything one way or another and maintain that control, we put ourselves in that position of ownership and control. What about Nash's point of use it or lose it? See, buried talents don't produce. Buried talents do not reproduce. They don't grow and develop. And if you're vetting this idea for the first time, just recognize, because I get asked often, I have this week, about return on investment. What's my rate of return going to be? And my response to that is, well, if you're vetting this idea for the first time, the moment that you own a policy that you pay premiums into and then you access the capital there for your need for finance because of the ownership and the control that you have, when you first begin to do that, recognizing that you never have before, your return at that point is, I don't know, it's infinite. It will be from nothing to whatever it is that you make it. However that policy is properly structured and however you successfully use it. Because if you don't use it, you lose it. If you never account for the need for banking function, you're beholden to someone else. You're paying interest to someone else, set at their terms and conditions. So what did it look like before you began to privatize your banking? Well, it was non-existent. So your return is infinite. Another is going to be imagination. And this is just so helpful for us to become more and more productive because, to be sure, the overseer that was given 5 talents, or the one that was put in charge of the orchards as I related it, he did not simply get a meager interest from a CD, let's say, just to use some modern terminology. No, he was putting that capital to work. And again, I'm not making any suggestions or giving any advice on how to use your money. I'm the proponent that you, when you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. You, I would encourage you, should become your own banker. You should be able to figure out what you want to do with your money. And how about the arrival syndrome? I mean, just because you're a manager, just because you're a governor, just because you're I don't know what it is, insert your title. Just because of that position, it doesn't mean that you've arrived. Just because of any position that I have, any knowledge that I currently have, any experience that I currently have, it doesn't mean that I've arrived. I'm most certainly still on my journey. I've probably most certainly made every mistake that could have been made along the way in practicing this infinite banking concept and applying it to my personal life and my business life. So recognizing that I have made so many mistakes by experience, I'm still reading Nash's works. I'm still applying Nash's works. I'm still growing and developing in other areas because I haven't arrived. And I don't think that you have either. Now, you may not have ears to hear or eyes to see, but then again, you may. And for those that do, remember that Nash says more is caught than taught. If you're vetting this idea for the first time and some of these things are intriguing you or striking you, or you're making some connections with these thoughts and ideas and you want to walk that out further, then don't be afraid. Just like the third overseer here, don't let fear keep you from making a phone call, from buying a $20-something book and reading for the next couple of hours. Find out what it is that you need to find out when you realize that you want to begin the journey of becoming your own banker. Make a phone call, read the book, seek and find, study to show thyself approved. So I hope that this has been helpful. And again, if you'd like to have a personal conversation about how you could implement or find out more about this infinite banking concept, you can reach me at 828-817-4223, or you can email durhamtalents@gmail.com. This has definitely been a great pleasure for me. I look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day. Take care. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Handsome. Where there lived a very lich